On the 22nd of February, 1879, a 27-year-old doctor in Battle Creek, Michigan, married a woman named Ella Eaton. They left for a 6-week honeymoon through New England, and he spent most of it at a writing desk. He was revising a manuscript. The manuscript was a book about the dangers of sexual desire and about the physical ruin he believed it brought on the human body. The marriage lasted 41 years. The couple kept separate bedrooms. By every account that has come down to us, it was never consummated. Over those 4 decades, they raised 42 children in their house, 7 of them legally adopted. Not one of them was born to the couple who raised them. The doctor's name was John Harvey Kellogg, and he was not a crank on the edge of American life. He ran the largest and most famous health institution in the United States. Over the next 50 years, his patients would include Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Harvey Firestone, Amelia Earhart, Sojourner Truth, and 4 sitting or future presidents of the United States. He employed 1,000 people, and in the kitchen of that institution, in 1894, he and his younger brother pushed a tray of stale-boiled wheat through a set of steel rollers and produced something no one had seen before: a flake. Here is the question this episode is going to answer. How did a food invented specifically to quiet the human appetite become the sweetest thing on the American breakfast table? Because the man who made it spent the rest of his life losing control of it. First the recipe, then the company, then the name itself, which was his own. We are going to follow that in 5 steps. A preacher who thought white bread was destroying the republic, a church that turned his diet into doctrine, an accident with a pot of wheat, a younger brother with a bag of sugar, and a lawsuit between 2 old men over a signature. It starts 60 years before the flake, with a minister nobody wanted to listen to. In 1832, cholera came up the Hudson River and into New York City, and roughly 3,500 people died in a summer. Nobody knew how it spread. Germ theory was still a generation away. Into that vacuum stepped a Presbyterian minister named Sylvester Graham, born in Connecticut in 1794, who had been lecturing for the temperance movement and had a complete and confident answer. Cholera did not strike at random, he said. It struck bodies that had been weakened by rich food, by stimulants, and above all by sexual excess. He offered New Yorkers a way to survive: eat what he ate. Coarse, unsifted whole wheat flour, baked at home, vegetables, cold water, nothing else. Graham's system was not really about digestion. It was about desire. He taught that a heavy meal of meat, wine, and spices would, in his phrase, increase the concupiscent excitability of the genital organs. That flavor itself was the road to sexual excess, and sexual excess was the road to insanity and early death. So he stripped it all out. No meat, no butter, no fats, no pepper, no mustard, no coffee, no tea, no alcohol, no tobacco. He prescribed hard mattresses, open windows in winter, cold baths, and long walks. And at the center of it, the food he is still remembered for: bread made from the whole grain, unsifted, unsweetened, baked coarse and eaten stale. The flour still carries his name. America's reaction was not polite. In 1834, Graham was mobbed for lecturing to a room that included women on the subject of chastity. In 1837, he came to Boston to promote his treatise on bread and bread making, and the bakers and the butchers of the city turned out at the hall to stop him. His followers had to barricade the doors. A trade that had spent a century selling white flour and salt pork correctly understood him as an enemy. And yet he kept filling rooms. Grahamite boarding houses opened in Boston, New York, and Providence. where the bathing, the exercise, and the bedtimes were enforced by the landlord. He kept filling rooms because the American stomach really was in trouble. The national diet of the 1830s ran on salt pork, fried bread, whiskey and coffee, cooked hard and eaten fast, in a country with almost no refrigeration and no food inspection of any kind. The characteristic American complaint of the period had a name doctors used constantly: dyspepsia. It meant chronic indigestion, and it was written about as a national affliction, the price of a nervous, hurrying commercial people. Graham was wrong about nearly all of his mechanisms. He was not wrong that the country was eating badly and felt terrible. He died in 1851, largely forgotten. But one small religious movement had been listening very closely. In June 1863, in Otsego, Michigan, a woman named Ellen G. White knelt at a prayer meeting and afterwards described a vision. White was one of the founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and her visions were how that church made decisions. This one was not about the end of the world. It was about the body, that the body was a temple, that its care was a religious duty, and that meat, alcohol, tobacco, coffee, tea, and rich food had no place in a believer's life. In a single stroke, Sylvester Graham's diet stopped being one man's fad and became the doctrine of a church. The following year, White traveled to see what a proper health institution looked like. She went to Dansville, New York, to a water cure resort called Our Home on the Hillside, run by a former abolitionist newspaperman turned doctor named James Caleb Jackson. Jackson treated with water, air, and diet, and he fed his patients an invention of his own from 1863: Graham flour dough, baked into hard sheets, broken up, baked again, and broken again. He called it granula. It was the first dry breakfast cereal made in America, and it was so hard that a patient had to soak it in milk overnight before it could be chewed at all. White came home convinced, and in 1866 the Adventists opened their own institution in Battle Creek, the Western Health Reform Institute, 2 doctors and a converted farmhouse. It struggled almost immediately. What it needed was a physician of its own, and the Whites had a candidate, a local Adventist teenager who had been setting type for the church's printing press, reading everything that passed under his hands. They paid for his education. He studied at the University of Michigan, then at Bellevue Hospital Medical College in New York, and took his medical degree in 1875. In 1876, that graduate came back and took over. He was 24 years old. He renamed the place with a word he liked better than sanatorium, sanitarium. And over the next 4 decades, he built the Battle Creek Sanitarium into something that had no real equivalent anywhere in the world. Part hospital, part laboratory, part grand hotel, employing over 1,000 people, with dozens of physicians and hundreds of nurses. The wealthy of America came to Battle Creek the way they went to Europe. Rockefellers, Fords, Firestones, William Howard Taft, Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover. They called it simply the San. What they got there was a system Kellogg called biologic living, and it was relentless. Patients were weighed, measured, and charted on arrival. There was hydrotherapy in every form the building could plumb. Electric light baths, sinusoidal current applied to the skin, breathing drills on the lawn, marching exercises to a band, mechanical vibrating chairs and horse riding machines, and enemas administered by machine and followed with yogurt. Meals were vegetarian, low in protein, low in fat, and served without coffee, tea, spice, or seasoning of any real force. Guests were taught to chew each mouthful dozens of times. Some evenings, the doctor led the entire dining room in laughing exercises. None of it was arbitrary. It all pointed at one target. In 1877, Kellogg published Plain Facts for Old and Young, which he had been revising on his honeymoon, and it sold in enormous numbers for decades. In it, he cataloged 39 signs by which a parent could identify a child given to what the century called the solitary vice, among them bashfulness, boldness, bad posture, acne, stiff joints, mood swings, and a fondness for spicy food. His recommended interventions were physical: bandaging, cages, cold treatments, circumcision performed deliberately without anesthetic so the memory would deter the child, and for girls, the application of pure carbolic acid. This was published by a respected doctor, sold openly, and read as medicine. It is the most direct statement we have of what the food was for, because the food was the gentlest part of the same program. Bland, coarse, unstimulating meals were supposed to take the fire out of the body before any of the rest was needed. There was only one problem, and it was practical rather than moral. The patients could not eat it. The sand staple was zwieback, twice-baked bread, so hard that, according to a story the family told for decades, one guest broke her dentures on a piece and demanded that the doctor pay for new teeth. Kellogg's answer was to grind the zwieback into crumbs and serve it as a granular cereal. He called it granula. James Caleb Jackson, who had used that name since 1863, sued. Kellogg changed one letter and kept selling it as granola. He wanted something better, and in 1894 he and his younger brother Will were working the problem in the Sands experimental kitchen: how to get a whole grain into a form a weak stomach could handle. They boiled wheat, ran it through rollers, and got sticky sheets of paste. Then hospital business called them both away, and a batch of cooked wheat sat out for a day or more. It should have been thrown out. The San ran on a strict budget, so they ran the stale wheat through the rollers anyway. And instead of one sheet, every grain came off the drum as its own thin flake. They toasted the flakes and served them. What had happened in that pot has a name in food science now. Moisture had redistributed evenly through each grain, a process the industry still calls tempering. It is the entire basis of the flaked cereal. The patients emptied the bowls. On the 31st of May, 1895, Kellogg filed a patent titled Flaked Cereals and Process of Preparing Same, and on the 14th of April, 1896, he received United States Patent Number 558393. Read the claims and you can see the ambition. The patent does not cover wheat. It covers the process, applied to grains generally. The product went on sale as granos at 15 cents for a 10-ounce box. The San was paying about half a cent to make it, and patients who went home started writing to Battle Creek asking for more. The Sanitas Food Company was set up to fill the orders by mail. Wheat, though, was the wrong grain, and corn was the obvious next one. Corn also had a defect. The germ of the kernel is oily, and oil turns rancid on a shelf. The fix was to take the corn apart, to flake the starchy heart of the kernel and leave the germ out. And by the last years of the 1890s, the corn version existed. To make the result taste of anything at all, Will Kellogg wanted to add malt. His brother regarded a flavor added for pleasure as a step backwards and said no. Remember that objection. It is the whole story in miniature, and it is about to be made twice more. The younger brother is the man everyone forgets, so it is worth stopping on him. Will Keith Kellogg was 8 years younger than John, had ended his formal schooling early, and had sold brooms for a living before coming to work at the San. There he was bookkeeper, purchasing agent, business manager, and personal secretary at once, for over 20 years, on a small salary and 15-hour days. He took dictation, while his brother was being shaved. When John rode his bicycle down the corridors of the sanitarium, Will was expected to run alongside and keep taking notes. In his private diary, he wrote that he was tired of being the shadow. He was, by then, in his 40s. Meanwhile, the Sand's own patients had noticed there was money in this. In 1891, a 37-year-old Illinois businessman arrived at Battle Creek in a wheelchair, broken in health and nearly broke financially, after 2 collapses had destroyed his career. His name was Charles William Post. He stayed 9 months. He did not get better. He left, moved into a farmhouse a short walk from the sanitarium, and in 1895 began boiling wheat, bran and molasses in a barn to make a coffee substitute of his own. He called it postum. In 1897, he added a hard-baked cereal, named for the grape sugar he believed it contained, called grape nuts. What Post had that the Kellogg's did not was an instinct for advertising that was 50 years ahead of the market. He wrote the copy himself. He put a pamphlet called The Road to Wellville into every package. He advertised that his cereal would rebuild red blood, strengthen the nerves, tighten loose teeth, and cure appendicitis, claims that would be illegal within a decade and were spectacular while they lasted. By 1900, the Postum Cereal Company was earning around $3 million a year, a fortune at the time, out of a town of 20,000 people. In 1904, he brought out his own cornflake. He called it Elijah's Manna, which offended enough clergy that the name was quietly changed to Post Toasties. Battle Creek noticed. The town went, in the words of one contemporary, daft over the food cereal business. By 1902, there were more than 40 cereal companies operating inside the city limits, selling flakes and biscuits and grain coffees with names promising energy, digestion, and long life, financed by stock sold to farmers and clerks who had read the post numbers in the newspaper. It was a full speculative mania in a single American town. It ended the way those end. 18 of those companies were formally dissolved in 1905 and 1906 alone. Almost nothing was left standing except the 2 firms that had actually started in the sanitarium kitchen. The sanitarium itself nearly did not survive to see it. At about 4 a.m. on the 18th of February, 1902, fire broke out in the main building. It went through the wooden structure in roughly 2 hours. 400 guests, many of them ill, got out into a Michigan winter night. All but one survived. The loss came to around $400,000, most of it uninsured. Kellogg rebuilt immediately, and he rebuilt bigger, a 6-story fireproof Italian Renaissance block, opened in 1903, the building that appears on every postcard of Battle Creek. It also left him carrying serious debt. At the exact moment his younger brother came to him with a proposal about sugar. Will's argument was simple. The flakes were dull, the market was crowded, and a little sugar, salt, and malt would make them sellable to people who were not sick. John refused on principle. So Will waited until his brother was traveling in Europe, changed the formula, and on the 19th of February, 1906, founded the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company, the business that is today the Kellogg Company. He was 46 years old, and he had just spent half his life as an employee of his brother. The flake that had been designed to remove pleasure from food was now being sold on the pleasure it delivered. That is the moment the doctor lost the argument, and he never got it back. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep making it. Now, what Will did next. He behaved like a man with 20 years of ideas he had never been allowed to use. He printed his own signature across the front of every package, over the line. Beware of imitators, none genuine without this signature. In 1907, he ran a campaign offering a free box to any woman who winked at her grocer, and grocers in American cities were winked at by so many customers that the stunt made the newspapers. That spring, he bought a lithograph of a young woman in a gingham dress, holding a sheaf of corn, called her the sweetheart of the corn, and put her on the box. He bought the largest advertising sign in the world in Times Square. By 1915, the company was spending $1 million a year on promotion. The brothers went to court in 1910, and the fight was not about money. It was about the word Kellogg. Both men claimed the exclusive right to their own surname on a food package. The doctor argued that the name had been made famous by his medicine and his institution. His brother argued that it had been made famous by his flakes. It ran through the Michigan courts and up to the Michigan Supreme Court, and a second front over international rights ran from 1916 to 1921. Will won. The doctor was restrained from using the family name on cereal in the way his brother now did. They were both correct about their contribution, and they never spoke as brothers again. The rivals were falling too. In March 1914, C.W. Post was in Santa Barbara, California, in severe abdominal pain. A special train was arranged to run him non-stop to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where William and Charles Mayo operated on him for appendicitis, the condition his own advertising had for years claimed grape nuts would prevent. He came home to California and did not recover his spirits. On the 9th of May, 1914, at the age of 59, Post took his own life. His company passed to his daughter Marjorie, who built it into General Foods, and the cornflake war continued without him. The doctor, now stripped of the company and the name, put his energy into the other half of biologic living. In January 1914, he convened the first national conference on race betterment at Battle Creek, 400 delegates over 5 days, and founded the Race Betterment Foundation to continue it. Its program was eugenics, the belief widely held in respectable American medicine at the time and later abandoned, that the health of a population could and should be managed through heredity. It ran a registry in cooperation with the Eugenics Record Office and held 2 further conferences. This is part of the same conviction that produced the flake, that the human animal was a thing to be corrected by expert hands. Then the era that had paid for all of it ended. The sanitarium had expanded again in 1928 with a 15-story tower financed with borrowed money 1 year before the stock market collapsed. The wealthy stopped coming. In 1933, the institution went into receivership. In 1942, the buildings were sold to the United States Army and reopened as Percy Jones General Hospital, treating amputees and neurosurgical cases from the Second World War. 3 future United States senators among the patients. The greatest temple of the pure American body spent the war fitting artificial limbs. Will Kellogg's last act was different in every way. In June 1930, in the second year of the Depression, he signed over the bulk of his fortune to what became the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, today one of the largest philanthropic foundations in the world. On the 1st of December that year, he abolished the 3 8-hour shifts at the Battle Creek plant and replaced them with 4 6-hour shifts, adding an entire extra shift of workers on purpose to put roughly 30% more people on the payroll in a town with no work. It drew national coverage and the attention of Herbert Hoover's White House. He was 70 years old and going blind from glaucoma. He was completely blind for the last decade of his life, and that fact decided how the story ends. In 1943, John Harvey Kellogg, 91 years old, still working, still lecturing, sat down and wrote his brother a long letter of reconciliation, apologizing for how he had treated him across 60 years. We'll never read it. His protective staff, reading his mail to him, appear never to have mentioned that it had come. The doctor died on the 14th of December, 1943. Will Keith Kellogg died in 1951, at the same age of 91, in the same town, 4 miles away. So what actually won? Not the diet. What survived Battle Creek was the format. Before the flake, an American breakfast was a cooked meal. Somebody rose early, lit a fire, and produced meat and bread and coffee. After it, breakfast was something you poured out of a box that had been sealed in a factory 2 states away, in under a minute, with no fire and no skill. That is the reason the flake spread, and it had nothing to do with lust or with dyspepsia. It fitted a country that was moving into cities and onto clocks, where the morning hour was being taken away from the household and given to the employer. And the taste kept moving in exactly the direction the doctor had feared. In 1939, a Philadelphia heating equipment salesman named Jim Rex, having watched his own children bury their puffed wheat under spoonfuls of sugar, flash-baked cereal in honey and corn syrup, and sold it as Ranger Joe, the first pre-sweetened cereal in wide distribution. Post followed with a sugar-coated cereal in 1949, and through the 1950s the entire industry followed, wrapped in cartoon mascots aimed at children. 50 years after John Harvey Kellogg refused to let his brother add malt for flavor, the business his patent created was competing on sweetness alone. The last detail is the one on the box. Look at a package of Corn Flakes and you will find a red signature across the front, and it is genuinely a Kellogg's. It is just the wrong Kellogg. That signature belongs to the bookkeeper who took dictation for 20 years, ran alongside a bicycle with a notebook, and finally added sugar while his brother was out of the country. The doctor's name is not there at all. The doctor is in the object itself, the flake, the temper, the patent, the idea that what you eat in the morning is a moral instrument. John Harvey Kellogg believed he had invented a way to make people want less. He was a serious physician, an obsessive, and one of the most confident men of his century, and he was completely certain that the plainness of the food was the point. The moment it left his kitchen, every single person who touched it, his brother, his patient, his imitators, and finally 100 million Americans at breakfast, made it sweeter. He spent his last 30 years watching that happen, under his own family name, from 4 miles away. If you made it this far, subscribe. It is the single thing that decides whether the next one gets made. And tell us in the comments, what everyday thing should we uncover next?